Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ivan, for your kind words. Can I just say it's a great pleasure to join you all in Croke Park for the 2023 National Pension Summit. And I want to begin by thanking the Business Post Media Group and iQuest Events for the kind invitation to speak to you today. And I think it's fair to say the issue of pensions has always been very much a permanent part of our national discussion, but no more so than today as we embark on what is arguably the most significant shake-up of our pension system in the history of our state. So as the Minister who is leading that huge and important work in government, I very much welcome the opportunity to highlight some key areas of reform that will impact on the pensions landscape in the coming years. And these include the introduction of an automatic enrolment retirement savings scheme, or AE as it is commonly referred to. The huge body of work we are undertaking also includes the overhaul of the state pension and the continued reform and simplification of the occupational pensions landscape. Pensions reform is a key priority for government, and while delivering reform is challenging for all of us, my aim as Minister for Social Protection is to face these challenges head on. I am passionate and indeed determined to ensure that Ireland has a sustainable pension system that provides the best outcomes for all our people. For our older people who are already retired or are close to retirement today, for workers who don't currently have access to an occupational pension, and we see here that a lot of women don't have that access, and also for our young people who have yet to really delve into what a pension will mean for them and who are relying on us, government and the pension industry to make sure that they will have access to an adequate pension when it comes their time to retire. One key area of reform that will impact the current pensions landscape in the coming years and for decades to come is auto-enrolment. And today, Ireland remains the only country in the OECD without a mandatory or a quasi-mandatory supplementary pension system. But that is about to change. And over the past year, we have seen real and concrete actions taken to implement such a scheme in Ireland as per our programme for government commitment. Last March, I published the details on the final design of the AE system with an ambitious timeline of enrolling the first participants into the system in 2024. When implemented, the new system will ensure that every worker will have access to an earnings-based pension. It will then enable workers to build savings in order to sustain their standard of living in their retirement. And I know there's been some commentary recently suggesting that our timeline is ambitious. Well, I as Minister have never shied away from being ambitious. You just have to ask my officials in the Department of Social Protection who are with us today. We all know that deadlines drive behaviour, and that is why I have set an ambitious deadline, and it is a deadline to which we are working and which we are determined to meet. And we all know that for many people, retirement seems a long way away, and we all felt that way once. We all thought we had a lot of time before we needed to start putting a bit of money away to ensure that we have a comfortable retirement in the future. However, what foresight didn't convince us of, experience did. And those of us with a bit more experience know that the process of putting aside a little to provide for our retirement is something that should happen early on in a worker's career. And the figures are, to be honest, quite stark. According to the CSO, the rate of supplementary pension coverage is around 56% of the working population, and it is estimated that this figure can be as low as 35% when the private sector is considered in isolation. Despite very strong financial incentives offered by the government, these coverage rates have remained relatively static for decades. With the market failing, it was clear that something had to change, and that something is auto-enrolment. AE will reverse that long-standing trend by flipping the current approach to supplementary pension savings from one where an individual opts in to an opt-out approach. The introduction of AE represents a change from a system whereby workers are often on their own to navigate the complex world of pensions to one in which choices and options are made more simple on their behalf. It also represents a change from a system whereby workers, particularly those on low to middle incomes, may have to fully fund their own pension savings to one which both employers and the state will make contributions. The design of Ireland's AE system is research-based and takes into account international experiences and best practice. And of course, as a late adopter of AE, Ireland is in a good position to learn from the experiences of other countries about what works well and what pitfalls to avoid. In the first phase of implementation, approximately 750,000 workers currently without pension cover will be brought into the net. And we're talking about those workers aged between 23 and 60 and earnings above 20,000 who we want to benefit from this major shake-up of the pension system. And for those earning under 20,000, they can opt in on a voluntary basis. So AE will not be rushed. AE will be rolled out to all employees immediately, but contribution rates will be phased to increase gradually over time. So that's giving workers and employers time to adjust to the new system. Both employer and employee contributions will start out at 1.5% of gross salary, rising every 3 years until reaching the maximum contribution rate of 6% from year 10 onwards. The employer's contributions will match those of the employee, and on top of that, the state will also make a contribution at a rate of €1 for every €3 saved by the employee. So this means that for every €3 workers pay into their auto-enrolment account, they will have another €4 credited to their savings, and the contribution will then be invested. So in layman's terms, every person who puts in €3 will have €7 invested in their pot. So that's a gain straight away of €4. Those who are auto-enrolled will have the choice to opt out or suspend their contributions after 6 months. And where a member opts out or suspends their contributions, they will automatically be re-enrolled after 2 years, after which they may opt out or suspend again after a further 6 months. So we keep putting you back in again, but it's interesting to hear from the speaker from Legal in General that most people don't opt out, so that's encouraging. A Central Processing Authority, or a CPA, will be established to do much of the administrative work, and this will ensure that the burden on employers is minimised. They won't, for example, have to set up a scheme, recruit or appoint trustees, or handle employee communications. All of that will be done by the Central Processing Authority. And as a former Minister for Business, I believe that this is very important. And I know too, from talking to businesses, that many of them want their staff to have pension cover. But what the state is doing here is taking the responsibility for setting up a pension scheme off the employer's desk. The CPA will also act in a custodian capacity for participants and will facilitate the pot follows member approach. So what this means is that as an employee moves from one job to another, they will have the same retirement savings fund to contribute to. Investment management will be procured through an open tender process from the commercial market for the role of registered provider. So to put it simply, they will invest contributions on behalf of the worker. Participants will have a range of saving funds to choose from, and these will include a default fund for those who prefer not to make the decision themselves. And it would also include an alternative choice of funds for those who wish to make a more active choice. At pension drawdown stage, lump sums are likely to feature strongly in the early years alongside commercially available pension products such as ARFs and annuities. But rest assured, the CPA, under the auspices of my department, will look at how the system should evolve over time and as the system grows in scale. Following the government's final decision on the design, the focus is now solely on the implementation of those decisions, with the necessary legislation being drafted and processes to underpin AE being developed. Last July, the heads of bills were approved by Cabinet, and work with the Office of Parliamentary Counsel on drafting the bill is progressing. Furthermore, the Joint Oireachtas Committee has commenced pre-legislative scrutiny of the heads of the bill. That process is still underway, with the committee having sought public submissions. Some stakeholders, including my own Department of Social Protection, have appeared before it, and I understand that the committee is expecting to conclude its report in February of 2023. Work is now underway developing the procurement exercises for specialised services from the open market, including scheme administration and investment management services. Work has also commenced on the development of a communication strategy for AE, which will see significant and targeted communications about the system, how it works and the benefits for participants. Alongside this, detailed work is ongoing across a range of other matters, including costing, governance and data requirements. So we hope to establish an interim CPA in my department on an administrative basis in the second half of this year. In all of this, the department is being assisted by a technical team from the EU Commission. I firmly believe that retirement should be a time when people can reap the rewards of a long working life. I'm therefore extremely proud to be introducing this major reform into the Irish pension landscape, which will have a truly meaningful impact on people's lives. AE is about getting people to save earlier and to support them in that saving process. We'll achieve this by simplifying their retirement savings choices and providing for significant employer and state contributions. The design of the system will encourage more workers to save for retirement, thereby helping them to sustain a reasonable standard of living into that phase in their life. So I'm going to turn now to the state pension. And as the bedrock of our system, the state pension provides a basic and effective protection against pensioner poverty. The state pension should, in most cases, be combined with individual retirement savings in the form of occupational pensions or personal pensions. In combination, this allows employees, employers and the state to each play their part in addressing the provision of retirement incomes. And there are many challenges facing the state pension system in Ireland, including the sustainability of the system over the longer term, rising life expectancy, and of course the adequacy of contribution levels and benefits. With these challenges in mind, in November of 2020, and in line with the programme for government, I established the Pension Commission to examine the sustainability of the state pension system and the Social Insurance Fund. The Commission was an independent body comprised of knowledgeable and experienced academics, pension experts, members of civil society and representatives of workers and employers. The Commission's report established that the current state pension system is not sustainable into the future. It set out a wide range of recommendations in this regard, including changes to PRSI contributions, increasing the state pension age and flexible access to the state pension. In September 2022, following detailed examination and consideration of the Commission's report, I announced a series of landmark reforms to the Irish pension system. The measures, which were endorsed by government, are in response to the Commission's recommendations and represent the most comprehensive structural reform of the Irish state pension system. Now, I'm not going to repeat all of the recommendations here this morning, but at the heart of our response is an approach to allow people to defer drawing their state pension between the age of 66 and 70 with actuarially based increased rates of payments. This represents, I believe, a fair and modern solution to a difficult and contentious issue. It brings us in line with other countries and reflects the fact that people are living longer and want greater choice in terms of their retirement. Over a 10-year period, we are also gradually moving to a total contributions approach as the sole means of calculating contributory state pension entitlement. We will also examine the social insurance contribution rates. And so officials in my department will prepare a proposal for government this year with respect to changes to social insurance contribution rates and the social insurance revenue base from 2024. These proposals will be based on the latest real-time data emerging from the forthcoming actuarial review of the Social Insurance Fund. My officials are currently working to implement the state pension reforms, including the drafting of legislation and the development of administrative and IT systems. And I look forward to bringing forward proposals to government in that regard. And now to turn to some of the wider reforms taking place in the pension landscape. As well as the introduction of the AE system and the reform of the state pension, another major strand of the government's roadmap for pensions reform is the improved governance and regulation of occupational pensions. Key to this are the regulations I signed in April of 2021 to transpose requirements of the IORP2 directive into Irish law. These changes will result in significant improvements to the regulation and the governance of funded occupational pension schemes in Ireland. Given that pension schemes must now be compliant with IORP2, there has no doubt been a busy and challenging period recently for trustees, pension managers and others within the industry. The pensions market is also undergoing consolidation with a move towards master trusts. Increased obligations imposed by IORP2 will improve the governance and communication standards of occupational pension schemes for the benefit of everyone. Furthermore, I believe that reform and simplification is key to developing a pension system that is more coherent and easier to understand. In turn, this will increase confidence and engagement among pension savers. With this in mind, the Interdepartmental Pension Reform and Taxation Group published its report on supplementary pensions in November of 2020. The report contains 42 interdependent recommendations which are being considered by a cross-departmental implementation group. To this end, a package of measures was enacted in the Finance Act of 2021, which included the removal of a prohibition of transfers from an occupational pension scheme to a personal retirement savings account for members with more than 15 years' service. The abolition of the approved minimum retirement fund and the extension of the approved retirement fund option to death in service benefits. The Finance Act of 2022 implemented another recommendation of the report in respect of the differential tax treatment of PRSAs by providing for the removal of the benefit in kind charge from employer contributions to PRSAs, and I know that's something that had been looked for. The implementation group continues its work considering the various recommendations with a view to bringing further reform measures as soon as possible. A number of other proposals from the 2020 report are currently being examined and worked on. As you all know, pensions require long-term planning, but the reforms of our pension system that I'm introducing will benefit many generations to come. I believe the policies being advanced by government will ensure that pension saving becomes a cultural norm and will enable citizens to confidently and properly plan for their retirement years. The various reforms I have touched on today represent some of the most significant changes in the pension sector for many generations. And these changes will be challenging to implement, but I believe collectively they will ensure that future generations can continue to provide for their retirement. So I just want to say thank you once again for the invitation to join you today, and Guramila Mahagiv Golair.
Just stay there 1 second, Minister. Thank you. And I thank you very much indeed, Minister. And I should just say the Minister flew in from Germany very late last night and has to now go off, God help her, to address the Labour Advisory Council, a fate worse than the Pension Summit. But just one question, Minister, and that is this, that we had Pete Lunn spoke earlier, and he spoke about auto-enrolment in 2006, and it was imminent at that stage. When you look at you've set out the policy, you've set out the government decisions. January 2024 won't be long slipping around. You've got to get all stages of the legislation through both houses of the Oireachtas. You've got to set up the Central Processing Authority, and employers have got to set up the IT systems to deduct it. For these really savvy audience of experts and trustees in the room, will it really happen in the timescale? Because Nest told us what they actually did was they couldn't have done it all day one. They did the larger employers first and phased it in. What guidance could you give as a realistic person? Ministers come, ministers go. What's your sense of the timetable?
Yeah, well, just to say that we're working extremely hard in the department at the minute to get this up and running, and it is complex. There's a huge amount of work. To even get to this stage, I know we had numerous meetings about the design of the auto-enrolment system, and we did a lot of talking to our European counterparts. So a huge amount of work has gone into it already. Now, we're working on setting up the Central Processing Authority, and we're doing that work now. We have a number of different strands. So we have to be ambitious. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the train is on the track here in terms of auto-enrolment, and we're just going to plough on and we're going to make this happen. We really have put a huge amount of resources into it. So I'm confident that we should be able to start now in 2024, and I mean that. I want to move it on, because you'll always find reasons why you should maybe not go ahead, and maybe you should look at this and look at that. As far as I'm concerned, we get it going, and like everything else, if we need to make changes as time goes on, I'm happy to do that. But the most important thing is to keep that, as I said, the train on the track and keep it going.
All right, absolute political determination to make EO. Minister, thank you very much indeed. I'll let you go at that. Okay.